I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanekeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick, Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, back with another edition of the Patriots Daily podcast, powered by Prize Picks and Game Time. We're also powered by a Patriots game coming up on Saturday, 1 p.m. tomorrow. It's coming up fast. It just hit the 24-hour mark, so we're just under 24 hours until kickoff. So what we're going to use today, Friday, mailbag edition, since we didn't hit it with Christmas hitting the middle of the week. So we're going to do sort of a mailbag turned into a Patriots versus Chargers preview. But before we get to your questions, before we get to all that, well, first of all, if you're listening and you have questions you want to get answered, throw them in the chat. We'll try and get to those as well. We'll prioritize the questions given to us on Twitter. But before we get to our questions and comments on the game itself, we do have to talk about some Patriots news that came down, because it's never a dull moment, never a boring day here, Taylor. We're thinking Friday, no media availability, Patriots are off, getting ready. But we have some comments from none other than defensive lineman Keon White, who spoke with MassLab's Karen Gregan yesterday in the Patriots locker room, and sort of was, there were kind of some pointed comments questioning his future in New England. He hasn't been happy with his play of late. He's struggled a little bit down the stretch, as has the rest of the Patriots defense, and basically said that he's going to try and get through these next two games. And now I'm reading from Karen's piece. If you haven't read the whole thing, check it out, masslab.com. Karen, as always, does great work, and once again does it here. But Keon White basically saying, I'm going to try and get through these next two games and then figure out what my future is and see where the cards may lie for the future. And didn't sound too confident about his future with the Patriots. So this is a guy who, Taylor, was lauded as a leader this offseason. Gerod Mayo kept mentioning him. He came in, was obviously going to be a focal point in the future of this Patriot defense, but also was turning into a vocal leader as well. He was kind of quiet year one, didn't say too much. Started apparently to, voice his leadership qualities, if you will, but has struggled down the stretch. So first and foremost, take all of this. What do you make of Keon's comments? And secondly, if he isn't happy here, could a trade be best at this point? Because he hasn't been playing great. So, if you get the Keon White at his current value, would you rather keep him? Would you rather try and make him happy and, send him on his way? Your thoughts on the entire situation before we get into the mailbag portion of the show.
Yeah, I just think the whole situation's kind of odd. I understand not wanting to lose and all that. I totally get it. But for a player like Keon White, who's been pretty inconsistent in his career, it just kind of feels like an odd comment. And he did acknowledge his run defense hasn't been very good. It hasn't been. And you've actually seen over the past two games since the bye, he hasn't made a ton of impact plays. He's had like his typical one or two key pressures a game, but you're not seeing any like consistent production, where he did have a few weeks where he was really good against the run. We called him out for it because we were also saying early on, when they were just getting gashed early in the season, they were playing really badly. And specifically, he was typically at the point of attack when they were giving up explosive runs. Now, obviously, they had like a few weeks where they got better against the run, and I think he had a lot to do with that. Now they've begun to regress again. They're giving up, it feels like 150 plus yards a game. And it's not always explosives, but teams can run on them pretty much at will, even if they're containing the really big plays. So, I mean, with Keon, I think that it is disappointing because he was someone who seemed like he was stepping up as a leader and all that. And we know he's someone who really more leads from what he does on the field than necessarily being a vocal guy. But that's what the coaches were saying, was in the classroom, he was being that leader because he was asking questions. He was being engaging. So, and then when it comes to his role, there's a difference between a player who can play all over the place and a guy who needs to play everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Where Keon White is best, like we saw in college, on early downs and run situations, he's better on the edge. Because inside, he has moments where he stands up to double teams very well, but he doesn't do it consistently, and sometimes he gets completely blown off the ball. So you really want to keep him on the edge. He has one-on-one matchups as a backside defender against tight ends, things like that. And he hasn't been great in that regard the past couple of weeks. Like, there have been some big runs that have been with him at the point of attack. And then on the interior is where he really shines, because he's been one of the best interior rushers in the NFL. Like, doesn't line up there as much as other interior defenders, but when he does, he typically gets pressure at a pretty high rate. So if he really wanted to move on and he wasn't happy being here, obviously I know Gerod Mayo wants to be vocal with his players, have conversations, relationships. Maybe they can have that conversation where if they do have a very active offseason and they do try to build and get better, maybe that's enough to keep Keon here at least another year. Then you're in year 3. If you want to get moved in the last year of your deal, we can make that happen. But it's really odd for a second-year player to kind of be talking like a veteran, like KJ Osborne. That sounds like what KJ Osborne was saying when he was asked these kinds of questions, and it was kind of like, I am where my feet are. Yeah. It's like, that makes sense. You're on a 1-year deal. You're right now like the 5th wide receiver. Sure, I get it. But Keon is one of the few building blocks you have on defense, along with, I'd say, Barmore, Christian Gonzalez, Marcus Jones. I hope Marte Mapu, but I don't really know if that's necessarily what it's going to be. So if Keon does want to move, I'm okay with it because he hasn't proven to be a consistent every down player for you. Very good interior rusher, but if a team's willing to give you, like, obviously you'd like to get a second because you spent a second on him, but if he doesn't want to be here, it's probably going to get knocked to like a third or some kind of package deal. If that's like a pretty solid pick, you could still get another role player who maybe can develop into something more. So you'd like to keep him because he is such a talented player, and I feel like he has the tools to be a pillar of this Patriots defense. But if he's going to be one of those guys in the locker room who kind of creates a stir, and now we all have to talk about it, to kind of put this into context, you don't really see everyone on the beat retweet the same article very often unless it's something very serious. Not serious, but it's something pretty significant. And everybody on the beat was quote tweeting this, being like, this is not nothing. So if he's going to be that kind of guy and he's not happy with being on the team, yeah, I say you move him because you're still very much in the midst of your rebuild. Try to get more capital, get guys who are going to buy into your message.
I was just going to say, as far as the locker room goes and, where things stand as far as Gerod Mayo's future with the team. Now, I don't think that this is going to snowball effect into the locker room blowing up from the inside out. But these are the types of things that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, where if Gerod Mayo is going to keep his job, he has to hold the locker room together and he has to have everybody relatively on the same page. And, in this article that Karen writes, he's asked about his mindset going forward. Does he need time to reflect? He said, no, it's the truth. I operate in black and white. I feel like I'm not playing good run defense. It's a multitude of reasons why. It's an internal thing that we need to figure out. And this is somebody who really backed Bill Belichick. And he was a big Bill Belichick guy last year. And, it's funny. These things kind of happen. And I look back at, I'm getting like tweet notifications from my tweet from 3 months ago when he came in with the Bill Belichick, when he won that award on his show Inside the NFL. He was talking about Bill Belichick. He thought it was super cool. And he was somebody, he's quiet. He played well here. There's been a transition. And clearly something's not clicking with this new defensive, mindset, brain trust on that side of the football. So if these are the types of things that are continue to happen, I don't think this isn't going to be the reason why the Patriots move on from, Gerod Mayo or anything, but we've talked about the locker room is still behind them. This is the first sort of crack in that foundation that we've seen so far.
Yeah, and this is what we kind of been waiting for is, all right, no one's speaking out against the defensive coaching yet. So, where exactly does the rubber meet the road when it comes to our players just not doing what they're supposed to be doing? And at the end of the day, you can tell a guy to do something until you're blue in the face. He has to actually do it, be disciplined, and be consistent. Keon hasn't necessarily been that, but at the same time, if he's not taking to the coaching, like Jerry Montgomery is someone that Christian Barmore has given all the praise in the world. He loves Jerry Montgomery. Obviously, Jerry Montgomery was also someone who survived multiple changes on the coaching staff and in terms of the coaching staff in Green Bay. So I don't necessarily think he's the problem. Drew Wilkins, it seems like odd that it would be him. He's another guy who, he moved around with who was the defense coordinator? Wink Martindale. Yeah. Who's with him with the Baltimore, with the Giants. Like, he's pretty well traveled. DeMarcus Covington feels like the only one in this equation where it would make more sense. And he was the defensive line coach last year. So it's still a little bit odd, but I mean, we have to take this obviously with a grain of salt to a degree, but we can't overlook the fact that this does sound like he's not very happy with how he's being coached. And obviously, you can still leave it open. We don't know necessarily who he's talking about, but based on it seems like who struggled among the defensive coaching staff, you'd probably fair bet that it might be Covington.
And you look at, too, I think Evan tweeted this earlier today. Josh Uche was the same way where, when you're not necessarily allowed to just pin your ears back and attack the quarterback or do these types of things in this system, guys get frustrated with their role. And Josh Uche did that earlier, and he ended up getting traded to Kansas City. And that was obviously only a part of the reasons. The other, he signed a 1-year deal here and clearly wanted to be here. But then it ended up being that it didn't fit what they wanted to do. So we'll see what go.
No, but the thing is, I understand that sentiment, but you can't play that way in the modern NFL. There's too many quarterbacks that can make you pay for it. And we've seen that. Like Kyler Murray got outside the pocket on Keon White. I think Josh Allen did too. You just can't play that way. It's one thing when you're in the interior, but when you're rushing from the edge, you can't go willy-nilly. You do need to be disciplined. And Keon said earlier in the year, he wants to be this wild horse where he's like, I'm going to go 100%. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to do it fast. And it's like, all right, sure. To a degree, I get that, but you also do need to be disciplined. And Gerod Mayo called him out for it. Not him specifically, but said like, yeah, but you have to, still do your job and fill your role. And how is that working out for Joshua Uche? I've looked at his pressures in his play in Kansas City. It's not like he's off the charts.
Inactive for like most of the games since he's been traded there too.
Right. And the pressures that he has are the same as with the Patriots, where he's giving up the edge. So you can get frustrated and want to be used more as a pass rusher. And maybe if he wants to be inside more, I get that. That's something I would be because I think that's where he's best as a player. Like line him up on the inside, let him pin his ears back. But yeah, when you're rushing from the edge, dog, you can't just do whatever you want. And if that's what he's unhappy with, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm even more okay with moving on because if that's your mentality, that's not a team first mentality. Right. That's a you first mentality. And that's not the way that this Patriots team, at least from what we've heard, is trying to operate.
Exactly. So we'll see what happens there. Again, if you haven't seen it, haven't read it, Karen Garigian writes for masslab.com today. Keon White questioning his future, apparently, with the Patriots moving forward, one of the key building blocks on the defensive side of football. All right, let's get into Patriots versus Chargers. We'll do this as a mailbag segment. We got your questions. But before we get into the questions, a quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. We'll be right back. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. They now offer MasterCard as well for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. And they put their members first. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you get your money in as little as 15 minutes. So join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December. And they're also giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas. Think James Cook will get more than 60 yards next week? Think Joe Burrow will pass for more than 1.5 touchdowns? Cook up your hot takes with your friends all season long on Prize Picks. And all you got to do is download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, thank you to Prize Picks. That's Prize Picks. Before we get into the questions, Taylor, let's quickly make a Prize Picks lineup for Saturday's game, tomorrow's game against the Chargers. A lot of Antonio Gibson on here with Ramondre Stevenson. A little bit of a question mark as far as his role will go. So, Antonio Gibson, will he have more? Where are we? Yeah. Will he have more or less than 29.5 rushing yards?
I'm going to go. Oh, God, that's kind of tough.
It feels low.
It does feel low, but he didn't do great last week. So I'm a little shaken by that. I'll go more. I like what Antonio's been doing. I think he'll bounce back.
I think so too, and I also think that they're going to use him more with Stevenson, at least like early on. So,
yeah, right. Oh my God, yeah, I totally forgot. Stevenson might get maybe not benched, but he's at least probably not going to be the starter. So yeah, actually, I'd lock that in. That seems like a pretty good bet.
Yeah. All right, let's have fun with this one. Your good friend, our good friend, Lad McConkey, more or less than 72.5 receiving yards on Saturday. Less. You going less for Lad?
I think the only way he has a really good game, and I think he's going to make like 1 or 2 good catches because he is good in those contested situations. Like that's something that's really surprised me a little bit more now that he's been a pro. I think that he'd have to eat against zone coverage over the middle, and that is still a possibility. But I think the Patriots are going to play like as much man as possible. I think they'd rather, get run on than have Justin Herbert just be able to have a field day. And I think they can lock up all of these receivers. I really like their matchups. So yeah, I'm going to go with less.
All right, that's the Pats Daily lineup. Antonio Gibson, more than 29.5 rushing yards. Ladd McConkey, less than 72.5 receiving yards. We'll tweet that out before tomorrow's game. A reminder, if you want to play along with us, head over to Prize Picks. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. All right, now let's get to the good stuff. Like we said, Patriots 3-12 hosting the Chargers 9-6. LA fighting for their playoff lives. So we'll try and kind of we got questions that aren't Charger specific. We got some that are Charger specific. So we'll kind of get to the both of them and use it as a full-on mailbag, but also a preview mailbag. So let's start with this. You actually mentioned the other day on Twitter about building from the inside out, building up the trenches. So what's more of an urgent, I guess, need for the Patriots in your opinion right now? Is it the offensive line or is it the defensive line? And I think this is good to mention and kind of dovetail off of what we just talked about with Keon White, because he's obviously going to potentially be a part of that rebuilding that defensive line.
Yeah, I think it's the offensive line because Drake Maye and Ramondre Stevenson are two of your biggest investments. I know I keep kind of lumping Ramondre in there, but if you're going to pay a running back what they paid him, you need to make sure he's got good blocking, and he has not over the past few seasons. And obviously Drake Maye, you want to protect the kid. Like in a lot of these games, you want better defense, but this is a quarterback-driven league. Make sure your quarterback doesn't get driven into the ground. Solidify that piece. But the defensive line isn't very far behind because you look at it, Christian Barmore, obviously, hopefully regains form next season, but you don't know for sure. You really don't. And then Devon Godjaw, probably only going to be here for one more season. Anthony Jennings feels like he's being overused now that he's an every down player. He's a great run defender, but it feels like when it comes to containing quarterbacks, sometimes, especially the really athletic guys, and also he's gotten runs bounced on him more than usual. And I'm not sure if that's just they played some really fast running backs in his defense where they've just had the burst to get outside and would against most edge defenders. It also feels like maybe he's just kind of there's more wear and tear on him now that he's playing so much more. And already as a great run defender, you're taking on a lot of contact versus a pass rusher. Really, you're more initiating contact. So I think the defensive line is still very close. You need at least two pass rushers on the edge next season. Like we talked about, Keon White, who knows what his future is going to be. And I think the interior is another sneaky need because behind Devon Godchaux and Christian Barmore, we've seen it this year. You don't have a ton of depth. I like Jaquelin Roy as like a rotational nose type kind of guy, but I hope they bring in a Milton Williams, someone who maybe not be a consistent and great run defender, but at least you know you're getting some pass rush out of him. And that's what this defensive line desperately needs. Not only can they not stop the run, they also can't get after the passer. Right. Obviously, the linebackers, the safeties have been a part of those run defense struggles. But I said on Twitter today, if you fix the trenches on both sides, I think the offense and defense look not a ton better, but I do think it would be a significant improvement. Like even if Barmore was back in the lineup, I think it means more negative plays. Teams may not be able to run as much because they're in longer down and distance situations. Right. So yeah, I think it's the offensive line, but you can't overlook the defensive line either because when you look, especially if you look like 3 years down the road, it's not looking too good.
Right. I think so too. I think it's more you prioritize offensive line now this offseason and then sort of continue to work through the defensive line next offseason. Obviously, Keon White adds a wrinkle into this, but I think if you can sort of hone him back in, get him to re-buy in, if you will. I'm not saying he's bought out, but obviously he has some questions about where his future lies. Christian Barmore comes back, hopefully healthy. Obviously, just cross your fingers there and see what's going on. But I do think as far as the offensive line goes, it's such a necessity because obviously you don't want Drake Maye getting beaten into the ground every week, but also he's somebody where I look at the O-line now as more of a priority even over the weapons. Now, we obviously want Drake to have, some more guys to throw to and make his life easier, but he's been so good that I think he can make those guys better. He makes the guys around him, at least the pass catchers, running backs, things of that nature, that much better as a player. So get that offensive line, keep him upright, and he's going to continue to improve and impress there offensively. All right, let's go to our friend Courtney here. Why does this game against the Chargers feel winnable? The Chargers are an efficient team with top defense, but I don't feel like they're unbeatable even for this Pats team. We did our three keys to the game yesterday if you want to check that out on the channel. But if we can kind of just reiterate it and also look at this Chargers team where we've sort of talked about it since after the bye where there's 4 games left. There's one game in the Arizona game that felt truly winnable. Then there was this game that was iffy. And then it's the Bills and the Bills, which, frankly, they played the Bills the best out of all 4 of them so far. But what do you make of this matchup with the Chargers? How can they beat them? And why, at least according to Courtney, does it feel so winnable?
I think it feels winnable because the Chargers just historically don't scare you, even with John Harbaugh. And I think a lot of that is because, yes, you have Justin Herbert, and the offensive line is better. And that's not nothing because their offensive line, the Chargers, just historically, it feels like they always get snake bitten where like multiple key players end up getting hurt. They're playing a ton of backups, and just the offensive line's been a mess. This year, it's been solid. Now, then the running backs have been hurt, and that's been a whole thing. And then you look at, I think it's a skill positions overall, because I don't think anybody can name anybody, but maybe Will Dissly in the Chargers tight end room. Wide receivers, Josh Palmer, solid player. I wouldn't mind if the Patriots were maybe interested in him this offseason. They wanted another quality veteran kind of guy, not high up on their priorities, but, maybe in like that second wave. Ladd McConkey obviously is a good player, but he's not like a huge difference maker. Like, he's very efficient. When he gets targeted, he's getting a lot of yards, but he's also not somebody that really scares you if you have a quality cover corner. So, and then obviously Quentin Johnston, poor guy can't catch a cold. I hope that he figures it out. Seems like a really nice guy and all that, but you need a little bit. I don't think
he's so up and down.
I don't think I'm disrespecting Hayden Hurst. I really don't think I am. But I think it's because their skill players don't really scare you, and you're pretty much saying, all right, it's just as long as Justin Herbert doesn't make a bunch of crazy plays and the Patriots can be at least decent in run defense, they're not that intimidating. And then defensively, they've got their studs. We talked about that in our preview where Derwin James, need to know where he is. Joey Bosa is not what he used to be, but he's not a guy that you can sleep on either. Khalil Mack, the guy's immortal. He's still getting after it. Tarheeb still has been outstanding as a corner that they got this season. But they don't have a ton of stars all over their defense. So it's like, we can definitely pick our spots and be able to have success if we don't get in our own way, if you're the Patriots. So I think that's why it feels winnable. And I was saying that before the bye week, that I didn't feel that the Cardinals and the Chargers were winnable the same way the Colts were, because I think that Kyler Murray and Justin Herbert are better players, and they have a little bit better supporting cast on both sides of the ball in terms of like those key players. But I wasn't really scared of the Chargers because every time the Patriots play the Chargers, they contain Justin Herbert. And it's not even because of him. It's because he has nobody to really throw to and not a really great supporting cast around him on offense. So I think that's why it feels winnable. And I do think it is winnable. I think at the very least, this should be another close game. If it's a blowout like the Cardinals was, then that's going to be one of those two-step back situations because I don't think the Chargers are nearly good enough for the Patriots to get blown out, especially at home.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's just the optics of it being a late December game against the Chargers, who have come in here and again last year they win 6-0 and they didn't play great, but it was obviously the end of season Patriots that were such a train wreck. And they've sort of had Justin Herbert's number. So I think every time you look at this Chargers team coming this way in December, it just feels more winnable than some of the rest. And it's funny, you think of the weather, and I saw a clip, actually, Adam Schefter tweeted yesterday of Jim Harbaugh's answer to his team dealing with colder elements and if they're prepared. And I looked at the temperature, and it's like a game high of like 42, game time high. I'm like, that's like not even that cold. Like, what are we talking about here? So, if they can't play in that, they have more questions to be answered, especially if they're going to try and make a playoff push here and have to go to Arrowhead, in later on in January or something like that. But, so, yeah, we'll see what happens. I do think that ultimately they can win the game, and I think the way you kind of summed it up there is perfectly where keep it close, keep it respectable. Don't know if they win it. Chargers obviously playing for more down the stretch, but if you come out sloppy like you did against Arizona, then there's going to be a lot more questions to answer after that game. So, all right, I want to talk Kayshon Boutte here, Taylor. 2 questions about Boutte. I'm going to ask them at the same time. Is it realistic to think that Kayshon Boutte can have a Nico Collins type year 3 breakout? And on top of that, how can he become more consistent if there's an opportunity for him next year to carve out that number 2 wide receiver role if they do bring in somebody who can be a number 1?
Yeah, I don't see Nico Collins because Nico Collins, we need to remember, like, he's big. He's fast.
Right.
He has ball skills. Like, it was just that in Michigan, I don't think he had a ton of production because obviously they're a very run-heavy offense. I don't know 100%. I don't really remember him pre-draft, to be totally honest. I was like right before I really started to dig into the draft stuff. But I don't think that Kayshon has Nico Collins' ceiling. But I think to maximize him, one, he needs to be more consistent. He needs to have the hands that he told us he had where, he has the best hands in the league. Well, we haven't seen that. So you need to be more consistent there. I also think that the best situation for him would be playing Z. I think he's their best run blocker. I think that he's someone who shouldn't live on the line of scrimmage. And I think to maximize him, you want to maybe get him in space more. He hasn't done a ton after the catch in the NFL. And that's one thing that's been disappointing because that's where I thought really he could be a dynamic talent. And we've seen the vertical chemistry he has with Drake Maye. he's the only one who's shown it with any level of consistency. That's not nothing because the Patriots need that verticality, and it sounds like they work on it a lot. So maybe just that chemistry sometimes can elevate a player's ceiling. But yeah, for Boutte, I think it's being more consistent, maybe a little sharper in your route running, and just being there for your quarterback, being someone he can trust in those man coverage situations. And I think he is, because a lot of the time when Drake does get those one-on-ones, it's typically Kayshon Boutte or like Hunter Henry that he tends to look to. So, and even more than Mario Douglas, who gets open a ton against man, he just doesn't get the ball quite as much. So, yeah, I think Kayshon not going to be a Nico Collins type player. Honestly, I think he's more of like a number 3, to be totally honest. I think number 2, he's like a mid-tier, probably lower mid-tier 2. But, he could still be a solid player for you who does a handful of things well.
I want to loop these wide receiver questions in, continuing on a little bit altogether, because the conversation is important, because it's not a good necessarily problem to have, but there's going to be a logjam at the position with Jalen Polk, with Javon Baker coming down here. And so I'm David Jacobs asks here, do you think Polk will get more snaps this game, or do you think they're going to start shutting him down for the season? And then looking at that too, if they do bring in a number 1, they do bring in a T. Higgins or even go through the draft or something, then you have Kayshon Boutte who's coming on strong. Where does Jalen Polk fit in this mix? You talk about Boutte being a number 3. Is Polk your hopeful number 2 at Z? Like, how do you all envision it? And then I'll ask this too, all in one, who's a keeper and who's a goner in the wide receiver room right now?
So looking at last week, he's had 3 snaps. I don't think that's insignificant. He had fewer than Javon Baker. I don't think that had happened before.
Yeah.
So I see him as in terms of long-term solutions in the receiver room, I think everyone's replaceable. I think you can upgrade every single spot. I really like Mario Douglas, but I think his issues against zone, the fact that they're continuing, is pretty alarming. And just really, it feels like this year you really see he is a niche player. Even though he is so good against man coverage, that makes me feel he's more of a high-end role player, where if you're playing a man-heavy team, then yeah, you want to get him involved for sure. He can be a gadget guy and all that. But I also think you could get a guy who's more consistent and gives defenses more trouble on an every down basis. Like I said, Kayshon Boutte is probably better as a Z. I still don't think he's like a really good number 2. I think Jalen Polk and Javon Baker can be the kind of complementary, very good number 2s who you can actually win with. But obviously they need to take the skills that we saw in college, translate those to an NFL field. I don't know that we're going to see more of Polk than we necessarily did last week. Also, it's so hard to guess because so much of this is based on practice.
Right.
Like if they practice well, then yeah, they'll probably get more opportunities. But Javon Baker got open a couple of times and had opportunities to catch the ball. He just wasn't targeted. So it's hard to know how it's going to shake out. But, obviously I think we can confidently say after last week having so few reps that Polk's stock is probably on the decline right now, unfortunately.
I know. It's kind of strange, you think, because, you listen to Mayo's comments with Tom Curran at the bye week and that sit-down he did, and it's, we want to see what these young players have. We want to see what they can do, but also, you mentioned practice. If you're not getting it done at practice, you're not going to get a shot in the game. So it's the Jalen Polk thing is really disappointing, and I know it's we continue to hit on it, and we continue to do it on the post-game show with John, and we try and hit it here, but, the people are curious, and rightfully so, because, they spent a second-round pick on the guy, and he just hasn't produced, and so looping it back into this question, who's a keeper, who's a goner? Like, I look at Javon Baker as somebody who 4th round pick. So, and we've talked about 4th round picks off the air where they're kind of dart throws in that, middle round where somebody you expect them to be maybe a backup could turn into a decent level starter. But is Javon Baker expendable? Like if you can bring in somebody else, obviously I think he is. Jalen Polk, a little bit different because you spent a little bit more draft capital on him with the 37th pick. But if you could sort of rebuild this room, and then I see in the comments as well, Carlos said Bourne would be the odd man out at that point. I wonder about that too. Like, how does this thing ultimately shake out? It's kind of, I hate to call it a mid-off. I hate to be disrespectful, but it's kind of a bunch of like so-so players that kind of just, there's too many guys.
It's a mid-off.
Yeah. All right, you're right. It's
exactly what it is.
Go ahead.
No, it is what it is. I mean, I don't even think that Bourne is the odd man out because he's actually doing things for you.
Right.
Like if you would go in the next summer and after all of training camp, Javon Baker still hasn't caught on. Yeah, 4th round pick. You call around, see, hey, will somebody give me a 6th for him or something like that? Or you cut him If 2 years in a row a young receiver is not producing and you took him on day 3, I'm sorry that you are expendable. Jalen Polk probably has like 3 years unless he completely bottoms out or something and another team calls saying, hey, I think I can fix him. I'll give you like a 4th. Then maybe. But I know Kendrick is getting older and all that, and he's been inconsistent as well. Every week he has one glaring play where you're just like, I don't know why you did that. I don't think you know why you did that. And it's weird that veterans are making those kinds of mistakes every week. But at least he's on the field and contributing. So, like I said, I think everybody can be upgraded. But I think like DeMario, Kendrick Bourne, and Kayshon Boutte are the only guys in that room where I would expect them to be on the team next season for sure. And then Polk for reasons that I said earlier, because they're actually on the field doing something. And maybe with more time with Drake Maye, obviously you get the whole offseason to train together if you want to. Then you got the summer, which I feel like, especially on defense, we're seeing that if you miss the summer, it's not nothing. It really, really hurts your development. So if you end up missing that time, that's tough. But if you get it, and Drake Maye is the starter, he's getting all those reps. It's not splitting it 50-50 or 70-30, whatever with Jacoby. That's all Drake Maye time. Maybe those guys can take a step forward. But yeah, I think that probably Javon Baker is the most likely odd man out.
I think so too. That's my answer. I think it's Baker. He hasn't been able to clearly get on the field or make an impact as much as they would have liked him to. And I think you can't move on from Polk just yet. You're kind of hamstrung to him because of the draft capital you spent. There's also potential there. It's 1 year. Obviously,
Alex Van Pelt even said that. He was
right.
like, yeah, it doesn't always click for guys in their first season. Dane Brugler came on the pod and said it as well. Like, I understand that it's very uncommon for a receiver to not be very good or be terrible in year 1 and then actually have a solid career after that. But those are 2 people with a lot of experience in the league who are pretty, guys you can trust, who have said, yeah, sometimes it just doesn't click. So I am not ready to give up on these cats. Let them just, they have the whole, especially because one other thing, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going on.
No, keep going. We're good.
I feel like people don't understand how hard it is to transition from as a rookie in the NFL. And when guys do, it's incredible because think about what you're doing leading up. You're not focused solely on getting better as a receiver. You're focused on getting explosive, adding weight, losing weight, doing all these things for the combine. You're doing interview prep. Very little of what you're doing before you get to an NFL team is actually making you better as a football player. So that's why Gerod Mayo said that year 2 jump is huge, because now it's like, all right, you don't really have an excuse. Put on added weight if you need to, get faster, get more explosive, refine your technique, learn the playbook so everything's automatic and you can just play fast. That's what year 2 is. That's why some guys, it can be a lot for them mentally, this West Coast offense. The verbiage alone is difficult, much less the adjustments you have to make, making sure you're in sync with the quarterback, when a lot of these college offenses aren't that strict. So I just think you need to take 1 year, give these guys till next summer. Let's see what they can do.
100%. Now you look at, the Nico Collins comparison from earlier. I'm not saying he's Nico Collins skill set wise. It's a different player, different thing. But just as far as the development, he started off slow. He was a 3rd-round pick for Houston, and now he's turned into one of the better wide receivers in football. Jalen Polk, 2nd-round pick, same thing. Give it time, see what happens. Someone who came in as obviously a solid player and can do a little bit more and has the skill set. So we'll see if he can continue to develop that. All right, we're going to continue on here in a second, but first, a quick word from my friends at Game Time. We will be right back. It's the holiday season, and that means it is also the best time to watch and attend your favorite sports games, and you can do so right now with the Game Time app. Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season, and that means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect holiday gift. They also have their new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to live events even easier. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks, best feature. They also have all-in pricing. You toggle it on, and it shows you the exact price you're going to pay at checkout. No fees, no garbage, just the price right there on the app. They also have seat views. It gives you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy your tickets, and they also have their lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets today with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it?
Game time.
Let's go. There we go. That was great timing. Head over to Game Time. I'm so glad I'm going to cut it that way. That's perfect stuff. Use code CLNS, $20 off that first purchase. Terms do apply. If you want to head down to Foxborough tomorrow, it's going to be a beautiful December day. It is still Christmas holiday break for a lot of people. So if you want to head down there, $45 is the low price right now on the Game Time app. That is the all-in price and feature toggled on. So that is exactly what you will pay. Nothing more than $45 to watch Drake Maye and the Patriots take on the Chargers. But let's get back to the good stuff here. Taylor, a couple more questions before we get out of here. Let's talk about this one. I found kind of interesting. Jacoby Brissett talked to Mike Reese last week, a couple weeks ago rather, kind of not sure about his future here. Has been the backup quarterback here for most of the season. Drake Maye has talked very highly of him. New Royal Rooters, however, asks, do you think the team could maybe let Joe Milton serve as the backup for the last couple of games to get him that experience? And it was interesting to me because I understand the premise where he's someone, if Jacoby isn't here, he would be a candidate to sort of take on that role next season. But at the same time, I think right now you kind of let it play out as is. Jacoby's been, at least inside the building in that quarterback room, the consummate professional. And I think if they did have to turn to somebody else to kind of run the offense for the rest of the game, they would much rather hand it to Jacoby Brissett. Now, I do think putting a little bit more weight on Joe Milton's shoulders here, game prep, having to worry about the actual opponent, getting those number 2 reps in practice. And then if push came to shove, he did have to go in the game where obviously the win-loss column doesn't really matter right now. I think that would be a little bit valuable to his development. I just don't know if they actually do it. But what do you make of the idea, and what do you think of the question?
Do we know if the emergency third quarterback gets a headset so they can listen to the play call and everything?
I believe they do.
Okay, I was just going to say, if that was the only difference, that would be a pretty good reason to maybe do it.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good question. I didn't even consider this. I also don't really know how much things would change. Obviously, you don't want Drake Maye to go down anyway, so hopefully Jacoby and Joe Milton are never going to see the field in 2024 or in any year in the next 10, 15, whatever. If there were more that would change in his routine, I would say, do that. And I'm not even really against it because I kind of do like the idea of Joe Milton getting an opportunity to maybe get some reps. Like in the case it was a blowout, maybe then he can get a series or two. You see what he's got. Like, I think that would be a pretty cool idea. So if they did that, I wouldn't be shocked. But also we've seen, Gerod Mayo, I think the comment about wanting to see the young players, it kind of feels like the burn some cash comment, not quite as egregious, but it's like, okay, but we're also seeing there are some players that clearly aren't. And some of it is justified because they're just not playing well enough to deserve those opportunities. And everything we've heard about Joe Milton in practice is that he's awesome. Like he's simulating all these elite, crazy dual threat quarterbacks, and he gives them great looks. I don't know how much opportunity he gets to actually run their plays. So if that's too much of a hindrance and they're like,
rarely, from what I understand.
Right. So if he's not really running their playbook a ton, it probably isn't a good idea because you're throwing him into the fire a little bit too much. But I think it is a good question and it is interesting. Maybe something we can ask on like a Friday, in the next game, again, because they're probably going to
we'll get one more. Yeah.
Yeah. If Drake Maye hangs like 35 and the Bills somehow don't score a point in week 18, would you want to get Joe Milton out there? So this is a really good question.
It's interesting too. You like, on one hand, it's, you don't want to throw him into the fire, but at the same time, I hate saying the games don't matter, but it's like, this is the time to do it, where you can't even really duplicate that in preseason as much because for the majority of it, it's install and you're working on almost all of your own stuff. And so there isn't a ton of game planning for a third string quarterback that can happen in the regular season because they use them so much on the show team. So an interesting idea. Maybe just put more on his plate. And I know that's tough because then he also has to worry about your offense and running your plays in practice. Then he's also the show team guy. So it would be a lot for him to take on. But I think it's, like you said, it's an interesting question as far as how they develop a third string quarterback behind the pros pro and the starter and Drake Maye, as well as Jacoby Brissett being there. Not, I don't want to say stepping on the toes, but sort of messing around with the depth chart too much. But if you're going to do something like it, this is the time to do it. So we'll see where that goes. It is an interesting question. Maybe we'll ask it next Friday with Gerod before the Bills game. All right, let's talk about the defensive coaching staff. Who are you, or how much are you inclined to keep DeMarcus Covington next season if some of the defensive staff goes to UNC? What do you make of Rex Ryan or Matt Eberflus as options on the defensive side of the football? Because now, before you flip out,
I'm freaking out because of the Pellegrino part. It's making it really sad. This is a good question. I don't like to think of a world where Mike Pellegrino is not on the Patriots.
Okay. I thought you were freaking out more about bringing in Rex Ryan or Matt Eberflus because those are guys who are good defensive minds Obviously, Rex is a different breed as far as the persona and the personality he brings, but he was obviously a great defensive coordinator and a solid head coach until he wasn't in New York and with the Bills. I wonder about that overshadowing Gerod Mayo a little bit. Same with, Eberflus is different. It's like, because you look at a guy like Matt Nagy, who was a good offensive coordinator, was a terrible head coach. Same with Josh McDaniels, and then goes back, and he's still in Kansas City right now as their OC and doing a good job. So these are guys, the retreads, who come in and can be assistant head coaches of value type guys. I wonder if guys like those would be options here. But also, as far as the Covington question too, like if Mike Pellegrino goes, then you're completely rehauling this entire staff. So I guess, what do you make of the defensive changes coming up?
Honestly, I'm indifferent on Covington. If he stays, I want help. Actually, I'm not indifferent, because if he stays, something needs to change. You can't just say, Covington, welcome back, everything's going to be exactly the same. I understand the injuries have been an issue, and it's put so many guys in difficult positions. I get that. I'm empathetic to that and how tough that must be as a first-year defensive coordinator. But I have yet to see him put his stamp on this defense in a positive way. It's the same question with Gerod, where I'm saying, what do you bring as a defensive coordinator? Because I'm just not seeing it. And it's not like we're hearing players go to bat for Covington. Like, they do it for Mayo, and they aren't asked to specifically.
The only person I've heard say like outstanding love for DeMarcus Covington has been Christian Barmore. And that was obviously too when he came back from the blood clots and he was asked about it. He was like, Covington's been great, Mayo's been great. So there was a little bit more than just on-field stuff. There was definitely a personal aspect to that. But you're right. Besides that, there hasn't been a ton of outward support for DeMarcus Covington from the players.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's a good relationship guy, and I feel like he and Gerod Mayo are in lockstep, but it's one thing to be a relationship guy when you're the CEO head coach.
Right.
It's another when you're leading the entire defense. I don't think that works. I think you need a clear vision, and I just don't know what that vision is. It feels like they're still the Patriots that we've known, but like we talked about in the bye week pod, where it's like, okay, well, we talk about why are they different? They don't blitz as much, but they only get pressure when they blitz. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. I understand you don't want to put yourself in bad spots at times.
Right.
Sometimes blitzing to get the pressure isn't always the best move against certain quarterbacks, as we've seen. Then you've got that. The secondary, sure, they play more split safeties, but they're not any better at playing split safeties. If anything, they're worse when they play cover two. So I just don't know how he makes them better. So if he comes back, get him some kind of help. If he leaves, I'm cool with that. Just get somebody, I think, with an established track record. Rex Ryan, I don't love, honestly. I just think he's such a big personality.
Right.
I just don't love it. And he's been out of the league for a while, and I feel like that's for a reason. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
And I don't want to necessarily compare him to his dad, because I think that's unfair. But I always think, when I think of Rex Ryan, former head coach, as like any type of assistant role, I think of Buddy Ryan on the Bears, when basically the defense, in the year they won the Super Bowl, let a mutiny against the offense because they were like, we're doing everything in this offense to do shit. So like, and they literally like I think Mike Ditka and Buddy Ryan. Oh no, that was when he was with the Eagles. He punched the coach on the side. His own head coach, he punched him on the sideline. So I always think of that, and I'm just like, oh, I don't know, in terms of Rex Ryan having been someone with a lot of power, being in the background. I don't love that.
Yeah.
Eberflus, I think he's kind of in that category of guys who are much better when they have a certain role than they are as head coaches, like Ben McAdoo, another kind of disgraced coach who was in a pretty big market, who is good at a role and is why he became a head coach, but obviously flamed out in that role. I don't love the whole relationship stuff where players quit on him at the end. Totally. That's a really bad look. I feel like that stench might take a couple years to wear off, so I don't love Eberflus. But I'm all for change. Just please keep Pellegrino if you can. Oh my gosh, he's like the one coach whose room consistently doesn't feel like a liability. And I know we can point to like John Jones against the Rams. We can point to Marcus Jones against Garrett Wilson and Jalen Waddle. But like, you can point to a game. You can't show me like 4 games where the cornerbacks have been the problem. I can say that about the safeties. I can say it about the linebackers. I can say it about the defensive line. I can't say it about those guys. So don't you dare deprive me of Mike Pellegrino.
I was going to rip us off with 2 more quick ones that came from Twitter. But first, we have a live one from our friend Zach Ventola. If Covington is out, what do you think of Pellegrino getting the promotion to defensive coordinator?
I don't know, honestly. I feel like it's kind of like defensive line in a way where your vision is kind of hampered. Like, obviously in the slot, it's not the same, but like safeties, linebackers, those are the coaches who often become coordinators because there's so much communication. You have to understand what's going on at every single level. Versus a defensive line, you're kind of just dealing with the defensive line. You're shifting and everything and maybe making some adjustments and calls, but you're not seeing the whole defense. And unless you're a nickel corner, you're not really moving around the defense as a cornerback either and seeing everything. And you're hearing calls, but you're not really making calls. So
Right.
I don't love the idea of a cornerbacks coach becoming a defensive coordinator, to be honest. I don't know of a lot of examples of that happening. I'm also a Patriot-centric person. I don't have a great tap on the rest of the league. So if there is, maybe. But yeah, I typically, especially at this whole Covington situation, I would much prefer to have defensive coordinators be guys who either have a track record of being coordinators or guys who've coached safeties or linebackers.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if he ends up going to UNC with Bill. I feel like he'll probably stick around here. I feel like the obvious one is Brian because he's his son.
Yeah. And it's not even just Bill, it's Steven, because that's who you're really going with. With Bill, It's a year or two. It's like, are you going to be with Steven for like a decade or something like that?
And Steven's going to be the DC, so he's going to be pretty much your boss there as well. Obviously, you know everything runs up through the head coach, but you're going to be working more hands-on with him as well. So it'll be interesting to see if they end up poaching anyone. All right, 2 more quick ones before we get out of here. This one I love. Who is a luxury pick or signing that you want the Patriots to make this offseason? And take out necessity, need, where the Patriots are. Just someone who you would love for the Patriots to bring in, either a signing or a draft pick.
I'm looking right now. Draft pick is Travis Hunter. It's not even close.
Okay, me too. That's my answer. Travis.
Because I'm sorry. I want the trenches to be better. I'm even like lower on Tet than I was. And also like somebody gave me crap on Twitter earlier for saying that I was more open on Travis Hunter and also saying they need to improve the trenches. You can be okay with multiple options at pick, like especially in the top 10.
Right.
There's a lot of good players. There's debate for everybody. You can make.
And there's so many different rhyme or reasons or ways this thing can go, and it's okay to be able to kind of talk yourself into any of them.
Exactly. And
that's what this time of year is for. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. And as we learn more about players, like I haven't even watched the tape yet for a lot of these guys, but then we're going to have the bowl games, or we're going to have the bowl practices. We're going to have the combine. We're going to have interviews. We're going to have reports. Like there's so many things that we're going to learn about these guys in terms of draft picks. And then free agency, obviously, is going to completely change what their needs are. So like my opinions are going to change. Buckle up. I'm not just staying one lane just because, I don't know, to satisfy some section of, our followers. I'm going to make sure that I say what I feel in the moment based on the information we have.
Yep.
I am open on Travis Hunter more than I was, but I still think he is a luxury pick because when you need help in the trenches and you've got good cornerbacks, I think they're going to re-sign Jonathan Jones, who's healthier, has been playing better. Mike Pellegrino pointed out he seems like a lock to be re-signed unless he retires. And wide receivers, you need upgrades, but Drake Maye is doing pretty good with the guys he has. I'm sure they'll find some veterans that are going to help that room out a little bit, but I just don't think Travis Hunter is the kind of player you need with the team that has so many holes. So draft, it's him with Bullet, like so easy. Next question. Free agency, in terms of realistic options, like I'm not going to say Khalil Mack. I don't think there's any chance he would come here. I would say Javon Holland, I think, is the luxury pick. Because you already have 2 safeties who are going to be around for a couple more years. Marte Mapu, I think, with a full summer under his belt, I hope can really get it all together, be more fundamentally sound and consistent, and then just be the playmaker and maybe increase that while making fewer mistakes. And then Javon Holland, it's like you have to commit basically to playing 3 safeties because you're paying all these guys unless you were just going to really bite the bullet and say, hey, Duggar, you're either going to have a reduced role or we're going to move on from you or whatever. But yeah, so in the draft, it's Travis Hunter. And free agency, it's Javon Holland because I don't think you need him. And honestly, he hasn't been as much of a playmaker as he has in the past either. So I really wonder what his market's going to look like. Like if he gets tagged, or I don't think he's get tagged. I don't know if they have that kind of money, but if he signs like a 1-year prove-it deal and a lot of money so he can make, maybe a long-term big money deal, especially the safety market we know has not been very good, even though he is 24. So yeah, those are my 2 luxury picks. That was a fun one. I like that one.
Yeah, I'm going Travis and I'm going T Higgins as well. Cause that's relatively reasonable too. I think, we mentioned yeah, because it's still like I guess
it's like a must. If he hits the market, I don't see how you don't sign him.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Okay, so maybe not, but well then I don't have an answer.
Maybe honestly, maybe Trey Smith. We talked with Evan about this. How like they have 3 guards right now already, and like signing one probably isn't the best allocation of resources, but also he's a great player and you know exactly what you're getting out of him. Mm-hmm. It's not like you're going to roll the dice. Layden has been better, but you still don't know if he's a Pro Bowl caliber player. You don't know. Cole Strange is probably going to have to play center long term. City So hasn't been very good this year. He's taking a step back with better coaching. So
I always forget City So is still on the Patriots. That's crazy.
I don't think you're the only one. And it's so disappointing, man. And I know everybody gets on Scott Peters for that, but I'm just like, I don't think it's a coincidence that when he wasn't being coached very well and was kind of doing whatever he wanted, he looked better. And now when he has structure, he looks worse. I just think his head's spinning. And for better or worse, he's also a 4th round pick. Like, that's where I'm at. Cole Strange, obviously, 1st rounder. That's disappointing. But Layden and City were both 4th rounders. 4th round picks you're hoping are either going to be maybe starters or very good backups. It's not like they're locked in and you can't move on from them, you know?
Yeah, so
I kind of took you under there. I'm sorry.
You're totally fine. I like the idea of Trey Smith, though. That makes sense because it's a need. It's a position where you kind of have what you think you might want there, but also, you know, throw a bag at him, and then you figure out the rest later. So, all right, let's close it out with this. Expectations for 2025, and would you be happy with like a 7 to 9 win season? And what are you, I guess, not happy with? I'll add
it's so early. I can't really give expectations, to be honest. Like,
fair.
Literally one free agents, like them signing T. Higgins could very much change how I see this offense. Because it's like, oh, you got an explosive receiver where I don't think there's a whole lot of places to get those in free agency or the draft, to be totally honest. But next season, if they make the improvements, like if we leave the offseason saying, okay, Elliott Wolf, like how we felt when he re-signed the core guys. And I think pretty unanimously at the time, people were like, yeah, that was a smart move. You'd like to see him sign more big names off the market, but at least they did that. And it seemed like there was a consensus there. If there's another consensus after the draft and after free agency where you're saying they did get better, I think you'd like to see at least 9 wins. I know that's a big jump, but we've seen that with teams that have the quarterback.
Right.
Once you get more pieces around them and solidify, you can make a pretty big switch. But honestly, even I guess 7's not the worst because you haven't had a 7-win season in years. But I really think you're hoping to be more in that like 8 to 9 win range at the very worst because you got your quarterback. He should take a step forward and be able to mitigate some of the mistakes he makes. Obviously, might take some steps back as well, just being realistic. But yeah, I think you're hoping to hover somewhere 8 to 9. If it's 10 or more, holy crap. Oh my God, that's insane. Right. And you really turn this ship around. But I feel like 7 is like right on the cusp of not being disappointing.
I think 7 is the minimum Gerod Mayo needs to keep his job again.
Yeah.
And again, there will be other factors, but I think that's like the minimum you need is keep building, even if it's slow, but there's more promise and things just don't go your way and you end up 7 and 10. Like, okay, you're not happy with it, but that's the minimum. I think the realistic expectation is 8, 9, 10 is sort of
the goal,
a comfortable ceiling / goal.
Yeah. Great way to put it. Yeah.
But again, it's hard to, like you said, it's hard to give it because you don't know what's going to happen. But as far as the trajectory of this rebuild, I think that's the appropriate sort of way to look at it. Anything under 7 wins, reset it again outside of the quarterback and go from there. But I guess that's where we're at. So we'll close it out with that. Patriots 3-12, welcoming the Chargers to Foxborough tomorrow. Me and Taylor will be there for CLNS. We will have Patriots post-game after the game. No John Zanis. We will be on the field, myself and Taylor, freezing our butts off, but we will get you a recap somehow, some way, and we'll see where this thing goes. Chargers fighting for their playoff lives. Patriots hopefully looking to play spoiler. We'll see if they can notch another win in the win column. So that is going to do it for us this week. We will be back, obviously, like I said, with post-game Saturday, but then we'll have Pat's Daily again as well, breaking it down and getting you ready for the final game of the season, Patriots taking on the Bills the following week. So until next time, thank you guys for joining. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the interaction. We appreciate it as always. And until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you all soon. Peace out, everyone.